The orbital station EO-7 was bustling with activity. Delegates from across the galaxy had gathered for what was supposed to be a routine diplomatic summit. The event was being held in a grand chamber with walls made of transparent alloy, offering breathtaking views of the stars beyond. Representatives from dozens of planets sat around a massive circular table, their colorful robes and uniforms creating a striking contrast against the sleek metallic interior of the room. The air buzzed with quiet conversations as everyone waited for the final delegate to arrive. Among the attendees were Linda Harper, the Earth ambassador, and her assistant, Chris. They exchanged polite nods with other delegates, though neither seemed particularly relaxed. This summit was important. It would determine trade agreements, territorial boundaries, and alliances that could shape the future of the galaxy. But there was one planet on everyone's mind: Deathworld. Deathworld was infamous throughout the galaxy. It was a place where survival was measured not in years but in days. Its harsh environment tested even the strongest species, and its inhabitants were known for their ferocity and resilience. Rumors about them ranged from exaggerated tales of brutal warfare to whispers of advanced technology hidden beneath their savage exterior. Whatever the truth might be, no one doubted that Deathworld's representative would show up ready for battle, literally. As the minutes ticked by, anticipation grew thicker than the recycled air inside the station. The doors to the chamber slid open with a soft hiss, drawing all eyes toward the entrance. Everyone leaned forward slightly, expecting to see someone clad in imposing armor, perhaps wielding weapons openly or accompanied by a heavily armed escort. Instead, they saw Jake Miller. Jake stepped into the room wearing flip-flops that looked like they'd seen better days, along with cargo shorts and a faded t-shirt bearing the slogan, "Life's Better at the Beach." In one hand, he held a corn dog, partially eaten, while mustard dripped lazily onto his fingers. He paused briefly, glanced around the room, and then took another enthusiastic bite of his snack before proceeding further inside. A collective silence fell over the chamber. Some delegates exchanged confused looks while others stared openly, unable to process what they were seeing. Linda Harper blinked twice, certain she must have misunderstood something. Surely, this couldn't be Deathworld's official representative. She turned to Chris, who sat beside her, his mouth hanging slightly open. "This can't be him," Linda whispered under her breath, though loud enough for Chris to hear. Her voice carried a mix of disbelief and concern. Chris didn't respond immediately. He just kept staring at Jake as if trying to figure out whether this was some elaborate prank. Jake, meanwhile, seemed entirely unfazed by the attention, or lack thereof. He walked casually toward the nearest empty seat, plopped down without ceremony, and propped his feet up on the polished surface of the conference table. He continued eating his corn dog, apparently oblivious to the awkward tension filling the room. When he finally noticed the stares, he offered a cheerful wave, as though greeting old friends at a barbecue rather than addressing a gathering of intergalactic leaders. Captain Ryan Lewis of the Galactic Defense Coalition cleared his throat loudly, breaking the silence. His uniform was immaculate, every metal perfectly aligned, and his expression radiated authority. "You're telling us you're here to speak for Deathworld?" he asked, his tone sharp and incredulous. "Where's your delegation, your security detail?" Jake shrugged, licking mustard off his thumb. "Back home," he replied simply. "Figured I could handle this myself." His voice was calm, almost lazy, as if discussing the weather instead of representing a planet feared by nearly everyone in the room. Linda decided to step in, hoping to clarify things. She rose from her seat, smoothing her professional gray suit as she did so. "Mr. Miller," she began, choosing her words carefully, "we appreciate your willingness to participate, but we need to ensure that all parties are properly represented. Could you please explain your role and credentials?" Jake tilted his head slightly, considering her question. "Sure thing," he said after swallowing another bite of his corn dog. "I'm Jake, born and raised on Deathworld. Know it like the back of my hand. As for credentials..." He paused dramatically, tapping his temple with a greasy finger. "All the info you need is right here." His casual attitude only deepened the skepticism in the room. Linda pressed on, asking pointed questions about Deathworld's resources, military capabilities, and political structure. To everyone's surprise, Jake answered each query with surprising clarity and detail. He spoke confidently about the planet's unique ecosystems, its untapped mineral wealth, and the challenges faced by its people. Yet, even as he provided insightful answers, he managed to slip in a joke or two, keeping the mood light despite the weight of the topics being discussed. Still, not everyone was convinced. Zixar, the Krylon ambassador, shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Standing nearly 8 feet tall with a chitinous exoskeleton and multiple limbs, Zixar was an intimidating presence under normal circumstances. Now, his mandibles clicked impatiently as he addressed Jake. If Deathworld truly intends to join Galactic Society, why send this? He demanded, gesturing dismissively toward Jake with one claw-like appendage. Jake grinned, leaning back in his chair as if thoroughly enjoying himself. Well, maybe we're tired of being typecast as the scary monsters, he said, his tone light-hearted yet tinged with sincerity. Thought we'd try sending someone who doesn't take himself too seriously. His response drew a few hesitant chuckles from the audience, though most remained wary. Linda exchanged a glance with Captain Lewis, silently communicating her uncertainty. Was Jake truly qualified to represent Deathworld, or was he merely a distraction meant to throw everyone off balance? Only time would tell. But for now, the summit had officially begun, and Jake Miller was front and center, flip-flops and all. The delegates tried to focus on the agenda, but Jake's presence loomed large in the room. Every time someone spoke, their eyes would drift back to him. He leaned back in his chair, balancing it on 2 legs, and occasionally licked mustard off his fingers. His flip-flops dangled loosely from his feet, which he had propped up on the table despite repeated glances of disapproval from the more formal attendees. Captain Ryan Lewis couldn't take it anymore. He slammed his palm on the table, causing a sharp crack that echoed through the chamber. Everyone jumped, including Jake, whose chair wobbled dangerously before settling back onto all 4 legs. This is ridiculous, Lewis snapped, glaring at Jake. You expect us to believe that Deathworld sent you, a guy in beachwear, to negotiate trade agreements and territorial boundaries? Do you even understand what's at stake here? Jake raised an eyebrow, unfazed by the outburst. Yeah, I get it, he said, his voice calm but firm. You're worried about resources, borders, and who gets to call dibs on what. But let me ask you something. Why does it matter how I dress? Shouldn't the ideas matter more than the outfit? Lewis opened his mouth to retort, but Linda Harper cut him off. She stood up, smoothing her suit as she addressed Jake. It's not just about your appearance, she said diplomatically. It's about trust. How can we trust that you speak for Deathworld when you don't seem to take this seriously? Jake tilted his head, considering her words. For a moment, his carefree demeanor slipped, replaced by something harder to read. Okay, fair point, he admitted. But here's the thing. You're judging me based on what you see right now. You don't know me yet. Maybe instead of focusing on my flip-flops, you should listen to what I have to say. Linda hesitated. There was a sincerity in Jake's tone that made her pause. She glanced around the room, noticing that others were starting to pay closer attention too. Some looked intrigued while others remained skeptical. Still, she decided to give him a chance. Fine, she said. Let's hear it. Tell us why Deathworld wants to join Galactic Society after staying isolated for so long. Jake sat up straighter, setting aside the remnants of his corn dog. For the first time since arriving, he seemed genuinely focused. Deathworld isn't isolated because we want to be, he began. We're isolated because most people assume we're savages who can't contribute anything meaningful. Sure, our planet's tough, and yeah, we've got some rough edges, but we also have resources you won't find anywhere else. Rare minerals, bioengineered crops that can grow in extreme conditions, and technologies developed out of necessity. We're survivors, not barbarians. He paused, letting his words sink in. What we lack is stability. Trade alliances could change that. They could help us build infrastructure, improve living conditions, and maybe even stop fighting over scraps. That's why I'm here, to show you that Deathworld isn't just a death trap. It's a place full of potential. The room was silent for a moment as the delegates processed what Jake had said. Linda nodded slowly, impressed by his clarity. That's actually compelling, she admitted. But if you're serious about this, you'll need to prove it. Words aren't enough. I agree, Jake replied. Actions speak louder, right? Just give me a chance to show you what we're capable of. Not everyone was convinced. Zixar, the Krylon ambassador, clicked his mandibles impatiently. Your explanation is interesting, he said, his voice raspy and cold. But it doesn't address the core issue. Deathworld has a reputation for violence. What assurances do we have that your intentions are peaceful? Jake leaned forward, resting his elbows on the table. Look, I'm not going to sugarcoat it, he said. Deathworld's history isn't pretty, but neither is yours, buddy. Every civilization has its dark spots. The question is, are you willing to move past them? We are. Zixar narrowed his multifaceted eyes, clearly unconvinced. Words mean little without proof, he countered. Perhaps a demonstration of goodwill would be appropriate. Before Jake could respond, another delegate chimed in. This time, it was Sofia Martinez, representing the agricultural colonies of Vega 9. I think we're missing the bigger picture here, she said, her voice warm and measured. Deathworld might have a lot to offer, but trust needs to go both ways. If they're willing to open up, shouldn't we meet them halfway? Her comment sparked a lively debate among the delegates. Some argued that Jake's casual attitude was a sign of disrespect, while others believed it could be a clever strategy to disarm opponents. Linda watched the exchange carefully, noting how Jake remained quiet during the discussion. When the conversation eventually died down, she turned to him again. What about security? She asked. If Deathworld joins Galactic Society, how will you ensure the safety of other planets? Your reputation precedes you, Mr. Miller. Jake sighed, running a hand through his messy hair. Here's the deal, he said. Deathworld's people aren't monsters. Yeah, we fight when we have to, it's how we survive. But we're not looking to start wars or invade anyone. All we want is a seat at the table. As for security, we'll play by the rules. No sneak attacks, no double-crossing. Deal? Linda studied him for a long moment. There was something genuine about his promise, though she couldn't quite put her finger on it. Before she could reply, an alarm blared through the station, cutting off all conversation. Red lights flashed overhead, bathing the chamber in an ominous glow. This is a code red alert, a robotic voice announced over the intercom. Unauthorized vessels detected in proximity to EOS 7. All personnel report to designated safe zones immediately. Panic rippled through the room as the delegates scrambled to their feet. Guards rushed in, weapons drawn, urging everyone to evacuate. Linda grabbed Chris by the arm, pulling him toward the nearest exit. Captain Lewis barked orders into his communicator, trying to coordinate a defense. Amid the chaos, Jake stayed seated, casually brushing crumbs off his shirt. When two guards approached him, insisting he follow protocol, he simply waved them off. Relax, guys, he said. I'm not going anywhere. One of the guards frowned, gripping his rifle tighter. Sir, this is a serious situation. Please, cooperate. Jake smirked, standing up slowly. Oh, I'm cooperating, he said. Just watch. As if on cue, the chamber doors burst open, and a group of armed mercenaries stormed in. Their leader, a tall man with a scar running down his cheek, stepped forward. Victor Kane, he announced, his voice dripping with menace. We're taking control of this station. Anyone who resists will regret it. The delegates froze, fear etched on their faces. Victor's men moved quickly, rounding up the attendees and forcing them to kneel. Linda clenched her fists, her mind racing for a way out of this nightmare. Then she noticed Jake standing calmly amidst the turmoil. His hands in his pockets. Victor spotted him too. Who's this clown? He sneered, pointing at Jake. Did someone invite a tourist? Jake grinned, stepping forward. Nah, I'm part of the party, he said. But hey, nice entrance. Very dramatic. Victor scowled, raising his weapon. Shut up and get on your knees like the rest of them. Jake shrugged, raising his hands slightly. All right, no need to get testy. But instead of kneeling, he suddenly lunged sideways, grabbing a nearby pitcher of water from the table. With surprising speed and precision, he hurled it at Victor, splashing him directly in the face. The room erupted into chaos. Victor sputtered, momentarily blinded, while his men hesitated, unsure how to react. In that split second, Jake sprang into action. He disarmed the nearest mercenary with a swift kick, then used the stolen weapon to disable another attacker. Within moments, 3 mercenaries lay unconscious on the floor, and Jake stood triumphantly in the center of the room, breathing hard but grinning. Well, that was fun, he said, tossing the weapon aside. Anyone else feel like picking a fight? The remaining mercenaries stared at him, stunned. Even Victor, wiping water from his eyes, looked shaken. Linda gaped at Jake, unable to believe what she'd just witnessed. The same man who had arrived eating a corn dog was now single-handedly turning the tide of a hostage situation. Mr. Miller, Linda stammered, still processing the scene. What exactly are you? Jake winked at her, his grin widening. Just a guy in flip-flops, he said. The stunned silence in the chamber was broken only by the sound of Victor Kane swearing loudly. He wiped at his face with one hand, his weapon dangling uselessly in the other. His men, still reeling from Jake's sudden display of skill, hesitated to act. For a moment, it seemed like the entire situation might unravel right then and there. Jake stood in the middle of the room, breathing steadily, but otherwise looking completely relaxed. He glanced around at the mercenaries, his expression almost bored. So, he said casually, are we done here, or do you guys want to keep this going? Because honestly, I've got better things to do. Victor's face twisted with anger. You think this is funny? He growled, stepping forward. You don't know who you're messing with. Jake shrugged. Oh, I think I do. You're Victor Kane, leader of a ragtag group of pirates who couldn't even manage to sneak onto this station without setting off alarms. Impressive resume. Victor clenched his fists, clearly fighting the urge to charge at Jake. But something about the way Jake carried himself gave him pause. There was an ease in his movements, a confidence that suggested he wasn't bluffing when he took down 3 armed men in seconds. Even Linda Harper, who had been watching from the sidelines, could see it now. Jake wasn't just some guy in flip-flops. He was dangerous. Before Victor could respond, another mercenary lunged at Jake, swinging a heavy metal pipe. The attack was fast and brutal, aimed directly at Jake's head, but Jake sidestepped effortlessly, grabbing the man's arm mid-swing and twisting it until the pipe clattered to the ground. With a quick shove, he sent the attacker sprawling onto his back. Anyone else? Jake asked, glancing around the room. His tone was light, almost playful, but there was no mistaking the warning behind it. The remaining mercenaries exchanged nervous looks. They had expected an easy job, kidnap a bunch of diplomats, make some demands, collect a ransom. Instead, they were facing someone who didn't seem to follow the usual rules. Victor barked orders, trying to rally his men, but their hesitation was obvious. One by one, they began backing away, their weapons lowered. Victor, however, wasn't ready to give up. He raised his own weapon again, aiming it squarely at Jake. You may have gotten lucky so far, he snarled, but let's see how cocky you are with a hole in your chest. Jake sighed dramatically, shaking his head. Man, you really don't learn, do you? Without waiting for a response, he grabbed a nearby chair and hurled it at Victor with surprising force. The makeshift projectile struck Victor square in the chest, knocking him off balance. Before he could recover, Jake closed the distance between them, delivering a swift kick to the side of his knee. Victor crumpled to the floor with a groan, his weapon sliding out of reach. The last few mercenaries finally realized they were outmatched. Dropping their weapons, they raised their hands in surrender. Within moments, the guards stationed outside the chamber rushed in, securing the area and rounding up the defeated attackers. The crisis was over almost as quickly as it had begun. As the adrenaline faded, the delegates slowly returned to their seats, many of them still shaken. Captain Ryan Lewis approached Jake, his expression a mix of awe and irritation. "What the hell was that?" he demanded. "Who are you really?" Jake grinned, brushing imaginary dust off his shorts. "Told you. I'm just a guy in flip-flops. Guess you should have believed me earlier." Linda stepped forward, her eyes wide with disbelief. "That was incredible," she admitted. "But where did you learn to fight like that? No offense, but you don't exactly look like a soldier." Jake chuckled, scratching the back of his neck. "Let's just say Deathworld doesn't exactly have boot camps. It has survival. If you can handle living there, everything else feels kind of tame." His explanation didn't fully satisfy the curiosity in the room, but no one pressed further. Instead, the mood shifted. Where before there had been skepticism and distrust, there was now a sense of cautious respect. Jake's actions had proven that he wasn't just talk. He could back it up when it mattered most. Sofia Martinez spoke up first, breaking the awkward silence. "Well," she said with a small smile, "I suppose we've all learned not to underestimate Mr. Miller." Her comment drew a few chuckles from the other delegates. Even Zixar, the Krylon ambassador, clicked his mandibles thoughtfully. "Perhaps appearances are deceiving after all," he admitted grudgingly. Linda nodded, turning to Jake. "You've certainly earned our attention, but I hope you understand that trust is built over time. Today's events might have changed some opinions, but there's still work to be done." Jake held up his hands in mock surrender. "Hey, I get it. Trust isn't something you give away, it's something you earn, and I'm willing to put in the effort if you guys are." With the immediate threat neutralized, the summit resumed. The atmosphere in the chamber felt different now. Delegates who had previously dismissed Jake as a joke were paying closer attention to what he had to say. When discussions turned to resource sharing and territorial agreements, Jake contributed thoughtful insights, drawing on his knowledge of Deathworld's unique strengths. His casual demeanor remained unchanged, but his words carried weight. One point, Captain Lewis leaned over to Linda, speaking quietly. "Do you think he's for real?" he asked. "Or is this all part of some bigger plan?" Linda considered the question carefully. "Honestly, I'm not sure," she admitted. "But whether he's genuine or playing a role, he's managed to change the narrative. People are listening to him now, which is more than we could say an hour ago." As the day wore on, progress was made. Tentative agreements were reached, and plans were outlined for future negotiations. Through it all, Jake remained a constant presence, offering input when needed and occasionally cracking jokes to lighten the mood. By the end of the session, even those who had doubted him initially found themselves warming to his unconventional style. When the meeting adjourned, Linda approached Jake privately. "Thank you," she said sincerely, "for everything. I know today didn't go as planned, but you handled it remarkably well." Jake smiled, shrugging modestly. "Just doing my job," he replied. "Though I'll admit, this whole diplomacy thing is a lot harder than it looks. Good thing I brought extra corn dogs." Linda laughed despite herself. "Well, whatever you're doing, keep it up. We need more people like you in these conversations." Jake nodded, his grin widening. "Will do. Just promise me one thing. Next time you see someone rocking flip-flops at a formal event, cut them some slack. You never know what they're capable of." With that, he turned and walked away, leaving Linda to reflect on the day's events. She watched him go, marveling at how much had changed in such a short time. Jake Miller had arrived as an enigma, dismissed by nearly everyone in the room. But through sheer determination, and perhaps a touch of brilliance, he had proven himself to be far more than anyone had anticipated. By the time Jake disappeared into the corridor, the delegates were already talking about him. Some joked about his choice of footwear, while others speculated about the true extent of his abilities. Whatever the case, one thing was certain: Deathworld's representative had left an indelible mark on the summit. And as the orbital station EOS 7 drifted, silently among the stars, its occupants couldn't help but wonder what surprises awaited them next. The next morning, the delegates reconvened in the chamber aboard EOS 7. The atmosphere was noticeably different from the previous day. Gone was the tension and skepticism that had greeted Jake Miller upon his arrival. Instead, There was a quiet curiosity, almost a sense of anticipation. Delegates whispered among themselves as they took their seats, glancing occasionally at Jake, who was already lounging in his chair with another corn dog in hand. Linda Harper entered the room last, her expression thoughtful. She had spent much of the night reflecting on Jake's actions during the attack. His calm under pressure, his quick thinking, and his undeniable skill had left a lasting impression, but something about him still didn't add up. As she settled into her seat, she decided to confront him directly after the session ended, or to brew. Now, though, the summit pressed on. Discussions resumed, focusing on specific trade agreements and resource allocations. Jake participated actively, offering detailed insights into Deathworld's capabilities. He spoke confidently about the planet's rare minerals, its ability to produce resilient crops, and even its potential for technological innovation. Despite his casual tone, his contributions were taken seriously, especially after the events of the previous day. Still, questions lingered in Linda's mind. When the meeting adjourned for a midday break, she approached Jake as he leaned against a wall, nibbling on his snack. "Can we talk?" she asked, gesturing toward a quieter corner of the station. Jake raised an eyebrow but nodded, following her without protest. Once they were alone, Linda turned to face him, crossing her arms. "All right, Mr. Miller," she began. "Time for some answers. Who are you really?" Jake chuckled, taking another bite of his corn dog before responding. "I thought we covered this already. I'm just a guy from Deathworld." Linda shook her head, her patience wearing thin. "No, you're not. You may be from Deathworld, but there's more to you than what you've shown us. No one fights like that unless they've been trained or lived through something extraordinary. So tell me, why did they send you?" Jake hesitated, his usual carefree demeanor faltering slightly. For a moment, he looked almost vulnerable. Then he sighed, setting aside the remains of his food. "Fine," he said. "You want the truth? Here it is." He leaned back against the wall, staring at the floor as if gathering his thoughts. "Back home, I'm different. Deathworld isn't exactly known for producing diplomats. Most people there would rather fight than talk. Me? I figured out early on that sometimes the best weapon isn't strength or speed. It's making people underestimate you." Linda listened intently, her brow furrowing. "So you're saying you were chosen because you don't fit the stereotype?" "Exactly," Jake replied. "Deathworld wanted someone who wouldn't provoke fear, or at least, not right away. Someone who could walk into a room full of skeptics and win them over without throwing punches. That's me." "But you did throw punches," Linda pointed out, recalling the previous day's chaos. "And you handled yourself like a professional fighter." Jake smirked, scratching the back of his neck. "Yeah, well, old habits die hard. On Deathworld, survival isn't optional. You learn to adapt, to use whatever tools you have. Sometimes that means talking your way out of trouble. Other times," he shrugged, "it means fighting dirty." Linda studied him carefully, trying to gauge whether he was holding anything back. "Why the flip-flops and corn dogs, then? Why not dress the part of a diplomat?" Jake laughed, shaking his head. "Because nobody expects a guy in flip-flops to be dangerous. They see the outfit, they hear the jokes, and they assume I'm harmless. It gives me an edge. People let their guard down around me, which makes my job easier." His explanation made sense, but Linda couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to the story. Still, she decided not to push further, for now. "All right," she said finally. Now that she knew a little more about him, she felt a strange mix of admiration and frustration. Admiration for his cleverness and resourcefulness, and frustration for the way he kept everyone guessing. When they returned to the chamber, the mood had shifted again. News of Jake's role in thwarting Victor Kane's attack had spread quickly, and many of the delegates seemed eager to engage with him. Even Zixar, the Krylon ambassador, approached Jake during a recess. "Your methods are unconventional," Zixar admitted, his mandibles clicking softly, "but effective. Perhaps Deathworld has more to offer than we assumed." Jake grinned, leaning back in his chair. "Glad you're coming around," he said. "Took you long enough." By the end of the day, significant progress had been made. Tentative agreements were drafted, outlining potential trade routes and resource exchanges involving Deathworld. Jake's input proved invaluable, as he provided realistic assessments of what his planet could contribute and what it needed in return. His laid-back attitude continued to charm many of the delegates, while his occasional flashes of seriousness reminded them of his competence. As the summit drew to a close, Captain Ryan Lewis stood up to address the group. "Before we adjourn," he said, his voice carrying authority, "I'd like to acknowledge the unexpected turn of events we've experienced. Yesterday, we faced a crisis that could have ended in disaster. Instead, thanks to quick thinking and decisive action, we emerged stronger. And for that, I think we owe a debt of gratitude to our friend from Deathworld." The room erupted into applause, with several delegates nodding in agreement. Jake raised a hand in mock protest. "Hey, no need for speeches," he said, grinning. "Just doing my job." Linda stepped forward, joining Lewis at the front of the chamber. "Mr. Miller," she said, addressing Jake directly, "you've earned our respect, not just for your actions yesterday, but for your willingness to bridge gaps and build trust. We look forward to working with you and your people in the future." Jake stood up, bowing exaggeratedly. "Thanks, folks," he said. "I promise we'll make it worth your while. Just don't ask me to wear a suit anytime soon." The delegates laughed, the tension of the past 2 days melting away. As the meeting concluded, Jake lingered behind, chatting casually with Sofia Martinez and a few others. Linda watched him from a distance, marveling at how effortlessly he commanded attention. There was no doubt in her mind that he had achieved what he set out to do: change perceptions and open doors for Deathworld. Later that evening, as the delegates prepared to leave EOS 7, Linda found herself standing beside Jake near the transport dock. "You know," she said, glancing at him, "you've surprised all of us, including me." Jake smiled, slipping his flip-flops back on. "Good," he replied. "Surprises keep life interesting." Linda extended her hand, and Jake shook it, firmly. "Safe travels, Mr. Miller," she said, "and thank you for everything." "No problem," Jake said, grabbing a fresh corn dog from a nearby vendor. "See you around, Ambassador Harper. Next time, I'll bring souvenirs." With that, he boarded the shuttle bound for Deathworld, leaving Linda to reflect on the whirlwind of events. The summit had started with skepticism and ended with hope, a testament to Jake's unorthodox yet effective approach. As the shuttle disappeared into the vastness of space, Linda couldn't help but smile. Whoever Jake Miller truly was, one thing was certain: he was unforgettable. The shuttle carrying Jake Miller departed EOS 7, leaving behind a station filled with delegates who were still processing everything that had happened. Linda Harper stood by the observation window, watching as the small craft disappeared into the endless expanse of space. Her mind replayed the events of the summit, the initial shock of Jake's arrival, the chaos of Victor Kane's attack, and the gradual shift in attitudes toward him. It was hard to believe how much had changed in such a short time. Back inside the chamber, the remaining delegates began packing up their belongings. Conversations buzzed around the room, many of them centered on Jake and his unexpected impact. Sofia Martinez approached Linda, her expression thoughtful. "You know," she said, "I think we'll remember this summit for years to come, not because of the agreements we made, but because of him." Linda nodded, smiling faintly. "He certainly left an impression," she agreed. "Whether it was his humor, his combat skills, or just his refusal to play by anyone else's rules, he made sure no one would forget Deathworld anytime soon." Sofia chuckled. "And those flip-flops. Honestly, I didn't think anyone could pull that off in a formal setting. But somehow it worked." As the two women talked, Captain Ryan Lewis joined them, his usual stern demeanor softened slightly. "I'll admit," he said, "I misjudged him at first. Thought he was either a joke or some kind of distraction. Turns out he knew exactly what he was doing all along." Linda glanced at him, curious. "Do you think he planned it? The whole underestimated guy act?" Lewis shrugged. Maybe. Or maybe he's just naturally good at reading people. Either way, it worked. He got everyone's attention and respect without even trying too hard. The discussion continued as the delegates filtered out of the chamber, each heading back to their respective ships or stations. For most, the summit was over, but for Linda, it felt like the beginning of something bigger. She couldn't shake the feeling that Jake's presence marked a turning point, not just for Deathworld, but for galactic diplomacy as a whole. Meanwhile, aboard the shuttle bound for Deathworld, Jake leaned back in his seat, propping his feet up on the control panel. He'd traded his corn dog wrapper for a cup of lukewarm coffee, which he sipped lazily as he stared out the viewport. The stars stretched endlessly before him, a reminder of the vastness of the universe and the challenges waiting ahead. Jake wasn't one to dwell on things, but even he had to admit that the summit had gone better than expected. When Deathworld's leaders had sent him, they hadn't given him much guidance beyond, "Don't screw it up." Somehow, between dodging mercenaries and eating corn dogs, he'd managed to pull it off. Now, as he thought about returning home, he wondered how his people would react to the news. "They're gonna hate me," he muttered under his breath, grinning at the thought. Deathworlders weren't exactly known for their love of diplomacy, or flip-flops for that matter. Still, he hoped they'd see the value in what he'd accomplished. Trade agreements meant resources, stability, and maybe even a chance for Deathworld to step out of its shadowy reputation. The pilot's voice crackled over the intercom, announcing their approach to Deathworld. Jake straightened slightly, peering out the viewport as the planet came into view. It looked as harsh and unforgiving as ever, its surface scarred by storms and dotted with jagged mountains. To outsiders, it might have seemed like a wasteland. To Jake, it was home. When the shuttle touched down, Jake stepped out onto the rocky terrain, greeted by a gust of wind that carried the scent of sulfur. A group of Deathworlders waited nearby, their faces grim and weathered. Among them was Dax, one of the elders who had helped select Jake for the mission. Dax crossed his arms, eyeing Jake skeptically. "So?" Dax asked, his voice gruff. "How'd it go?" Jake shrugged, flashing his trademark grin. "Pretty well, actually. Got us some trade deals, avoided getting shot, and ate a lot of corn. Dogs. Standard stuff." Dax raised an eyebrow, clearly unimpressed. "Corn dogs. That's your report?" "Hey, don't knock 'em till you try 'em," Jake replied. "Trust me, they're a game changer." Despite his casual tone, Jake could tell that Dax and the others were eager to hear more. Over the next hour, he recounted the events of the summit, skipping over the jokes and focusing on the outcomes. By the time he finished, the skepticism in the group had softened slightly. "You really think these agreements will help?" Dax asked, his tone less hostile now. Jake nodded. "Yeah, I do. It's not going to fix everything overnight, but it's a start. We've got a foot in the door, and that's more than we've had in years." Dax studied him for a moment, then gave a slow nod. "All right, kid. You did good. Don't let it go to your head." Jake laughed, shaking his head. "No promises." Back on EOS 7, the aftermath of the summit rippled through the galaxy. News of Deathworld's participation and Jake's role in thwarting Victor Kane's attack spread quickly. Journalists clamored for interviews, analysts debated the implications, and diplomats speculated about future negotiations. For the first time in decades, Deathworld was being discussed not as a threat, but as a potential ally. Linda found herself fielding questions from Earth's leadership, who were eager to learn more about Jake and his methods. "He's unique," she told them during one briefing. "Not just because of his skills, but because of the way he approaches problems. He doesn't follow the usual rules, and that's what makes him effective." Her superiors listened intently, though some remained cautious. "We'll need to monitor the situation closely," one official warned. "Deathworld isn't exactly known for playing nice." Linda nodded, understanding their concerns. "True. But if Jake is any indication, they're willing to try. And that's worth exploring." In the weeks that followed, preliminary shipments of resources began arriving from Deathworld, along with updates on infrastructure projects funded by the new trade agreements. The changes were small, but promising. Slowly, Trust began to build, not just between Deathworld and its neighbors, but within the planet itself. For Jake, life returned to normal, or as normal as it could be on Deathworld. He spent his days helping coordinate deliveries, overseeing construction efforts, and occasionally testing new crops in the harshest corners of the planet. Despite his newfound fame, he refused to take himself too seriously. When visitors from other planets arrived to inspect progress, they often found him barefoot, cracking jokes and munching on yet another corn dog. One day, Linda's face appeared on a communication screen, interrupting Jake's lunch. "Ambassador Harper?" He greeted her cheerfully, crumbs still clinging to his fingers. "To what do I owe the pleasure?" Linda smiled, shaking her head. "Just checking in. How's everything going?" "Great," Jake replied. "Still standing, still eating. What about you? How's the rest of the galaxy holding up?" Linda hesitated, then sighed. "Honestly, it's been complicated. But your example has inspired some changes. People are starting to rethink old assumptions, not just about Deathworld, but about each other." Jake grinned, leaning closer to the screen. "See? Told you corn dogs could save the galaxy." Linda laughed, rolling her eyes. "Keep dreaming, Mr. Miller. Just don't stop doing what you're doing. We need more people like you." "Don't worry," Jake said, raising his half-eaten snack in salute. "I'm not going anywhere. Unless there's another summit. Then I'll bring extra napkins." As the transmission ended, Jake leaned back, satisfied. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, for Deathworld or for the galaxy. But he knew one thing for certain. Appearances could be deceiving, and sometimes the most dangerous person in the room wasn't the one wearing armor. Sometimes it was just a guy in flip-flops, ready to prove everyone wrong.